and then we'll never speak to each other again. I promise this is the last time we'll talk, ever, ever. Hi guys, we're just going live. We're on a little bit early. No, it's actually right on time. So I guess we're running a little bit late. I'm here with James. He's calling all the way in from San Francisco, super far, a million miles away. Hello, Eric and Victoria. And Eve is on, Jason, nice to see you. So James has a question for you guys. You want to ask it, James?
Yes, I'm curious to the people.
Oh no, your internet cut. Or is that me?
What's that?
Okay, the internet cut. So you want to ask that again?
Oh yeah, what is the last typeface that you purchased? I'm curious to know. And what is the last typeface that you have stolen illegally?
Here we go. Let's see, guys.
I don't know if people will really own up to it, though.
I don't know.
They'll probably be too ashamed to say what they stole, but I mean, they're not fooling anyone. I know that they've stolen.
Joe says,
yeah, they're embarrassed.
Yeah. Actually, I can't even remember the last one that I bought. I know it was something, must have been like a hand lettering, sign painting, something or other for, something that looked like sign painting, but wasn't actually sign painting. So well, Dave Coleman says he stole Harlow Solid.
Okay.
And Arnold Hepler says, Fit from DJR. DJR is the last one that he
Fit, dude. DJR in the house. Love that. So good. Fit is so dope. The guy
Fit is beautiful.
And what a weird little design challenge. And he absolutely nailed it, I think.
He did a great job.
DJR
says
is like the second coming, in my opinion.
He's the Jesus of type design.
He's the Jesus of type design. Yes, he's the benevolent king.
Sweet. Yeah. So David Jonathan Ross says Arnold is awesome and thank you.
All right. Cool.
Dietrich says he got his hands on lexicon. Won't dare to use it though.
Got his hands on lexicon, and now that's Inshade, right? So that was like millions of dollars. Those fonts are the most expensive fonts ever.
Oh my gosh!
I think.
Just like
I'm not exactly sure, but if you've stolen lexicon, then I'm pretty sure you can just get sent right to the electric chair for that. Lexicon,
all right, let's see.
The pinnacle of Dutch beauty.
Jason said that he extracted the music fonts from GarageBand, but it's not really stealing. Probably a TOS violation.
We got some serious nerd stuff going on. Extracting, that's one. Music fonts, that's a whole other thing. Music fonts are very weird. Most of them are not drawn very well. I think I've looked at like Sonata before in a font editor. I was like, what is this thing? Some wonky curves in there.
Let's see. Jennifer says, I stole Meadowbrook, a scripty font. I felt guilty and then bought it later that day. Wow. They really got you.
Bravo, Jennifer. We like to hear those things. I like it when people are so overcome with guilt that their conscience forces them to rectify the situation. Good job, Jennifer. That makes
Patrick bought Stay Gold, a cheap font for a poster for his son.
Okay.
Eric purchased Station number 2 for his wedding invitation, but stole a Bisu. Yeah, that's a good one to steal.
Wait, whoa, Rachel. You run Type Ed, dude. You cannot say that's a good one to steal. No stealing, not okay. That's the whole point.
See, DJR said that he bought Belly and he stole Agenda, he thinks.
Oh, Belly, dude, Roxanne, she's the bomb.
Yeah.
She's killing it. She's so young too. I mean, she won the Catalyst Award this year. Belly is beautiful. Got some funky flavor in there, which I always like.
Diego said the last one he bought was branding by Latino Type.
Okay, not familiar with it off the top of my head, but kudos for shelling out the dough.
Right. Joe, last one I bought was Sneak by Type. I've never heard of Type, so I should look him up.
You know,
I think
it's always interesting to hear the answers to this question, I think, because there's always things that I'm like, well, I've never heard of that. And I'm in it all the time, but there's just so much, there's an infinite abyss of type and different things to look at. And that's a really wonderful thing. I kind of like hearing people making these choices that I don't even know anything about.
that's right. And that's why I love our challenge to ask people to post display faces, because there's no way to know all the different typefaces. So it's great when we share them with each other.
Yeah, unless you're Stephen Coles or Nick Sherman or one of these other people with this encyclopedic knowledge of stuff just floating around all the time. I try and stay up on it, and it's fun for me. And I, you know, I'm pretty much on top of the new releases and stuff. But there's just so much to know. And frankly, I'm not a historian, you know, and I would rather be drawing most of the time than and like reading or something, you know.
James, so we got one more. Eve says, last type family I bought was Vidange by Jack Usin from Psyops. So,
okay, Psyops, yeah, local foundry here in San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Excellent.
Very cool, Eves. What's up, dude?
So it's 2:07. We're getting started a little bit late. I want to welcome everyone to Type Dojo. I'm Rachel from Los Angeles. I'm joined by James Edmondson in San Francisco, and he's from OHNO Type Co, which is great. I love how everyone's posting on the OHNO Dojo. And
absolutely everyone.
Exactly, everyone. Eves, if it's not working every once in a while, just refresh your browser and we will come back, I promise. So James has a little thing to show us. He's gonna talk a bit. We might get into some questions. We are going to discuss who won the OHNO Dojo challenge. But let's get started with the presentation first. Does that work with you, James?
Yeah, I mean, we can do whatever you want, Rachel. I mean, I have the presentation ready to go. The presentation is basically to talk about my background and, you know, a couple of fonts, but this could go for 3 hours because I love to hear myself speak and I'm just a complete blowhard in general. But I'll try and keep it nice and brief for you guys.
Nice. Well,
so,
Eve says he wants to see you dance afterwards, of course.
Oh, yeah, I want to see him dance, man. The feeling is mutual there. Just for the people that are new to the type world, there are two exceptional dancers.
Here we go.
One is Jan Middendorp, who is the author of Dutch Type.
Oh my!
He can cut a rug on the floor. I don't know. He's just a great dancer. But Eves, I mean, there's no one that can touch Eves. Peter Bieliak, also another great dancer. It's actually kind of funny to think about now, all the type people that can really shake a leg on the floor. All right, let's get into it, if that's all right with you.
Yes, let's do that. Right? Give me 1 second. I just wanted to let everyone know we still have more people who are registered who are not quite here. So if you can use the share button underneath our video and let everyone know we are getting started. And then James is going to lay it on us. Right, James?
I disagree. I think we should keep this group as small as possible. I just want it to be me, you, and maybe Eves and DJR. Okay. Then I'll be super comfortable.
All right,
let's get into it. First of all, thank you to Rachel and TypeEd for asking me to do this. This is a fun part of my job to talk about the work that I do because most of it is just so lonely. these are a list of things that graphic designers are expected to do. And it's a lot of stuff. And it wasn't so long ago, I think, that all of these jobs were kind of their own individual profession. And so now, on top of all that stuff, graphic designers are also expected to be all of these things. So in general, that's a lot of stuff. Then eventually some asshole comes along and says, oh, you should also be doing side projects. And this kind of became popular when I was in design school, and I just kind of had a bad feeling about it. So it was my natural feeling that I wanted to distance myself away from trying to do everything and just in general focus as much as possible on one small thing. So that kind of ended up being display type. And so I'm just going to talk about that stuff a little bit with you guys today. So why am I here? The most important thing is to find some way to purchase marker paper at cost. So if anyone is listening and they have connects to the Canson Paper Company, please let me know. I spend a fortune on this stuff and they owe me some paper. Second thing I want to talk about is getting more people to follow my vertical storage pin board on Pinterest. There's some really great storage techniques on there, and I think you should follow me along for the journey. I like vertical storage so much, I made up a slogan for it: vertical storage, do it yourself.
Oh, so good.
Thank you, Rachel. From a young age, I was always dreaming about fonts. There's the rest of my family. And I especially like my brother, Georgie, here in the face. And Christmas card photos. I mean, look at those red polos. We were looking real good. Grew up on the Central Coast of California, skateboarding. And if you're cool, you always put your friend under you when you're skateboarding. My earliest lettering attempts were things in school with the school art supplies, kind of tape and construction paper type of thing. But, you know, it's still display type. So when I see this stuff, I kind of connect the dots and realize that I was interested in these sorts of shapes just naturally for a long time. And this is obviously a far cry to the type that I'm working on now, but there's something in there that I still kind of like and appreciate, and I'm just drawn to on a very basic level. My introduction to graphic design was making a lot of different graphics that looked like this. My brother ran a website that was like a real estate agent directory, so that kind of tells you around what year it was, something like 2002, maybe 2001. So yeah, 15 or plus years ago. I, of course, didn't make just one of these little graphics. I spent a long time in what I call the bowels of graphic design, doing all these different real estate agent graphics, which looks awful. I mean, this is not fun work when I look at it now, but at the time when you're learning the software and you're learning kind of how type hierarchies work and learning about new fonts and stuff like that, I was having a really good time, and I would get paid like $10 a graphic or something like that. So I was making, in my mind, excellent money, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I went to California College of the Arts, which is a great school in San Francisco. It's a very expensive school, and I think it's total bullshit that school costs that much. But yeah, it is what it is. It worked out for me. After that, during school, I was doing this sort of work, which is just the sort of thing where you see it now and you're like, why did I even keep going? But it was really fun, and I wasn't trying to do anything perfect or make fonts for like commercial release or anything. I was just trying to, you know, dip my toes into something I didn't really know anything about. real quick, and because this is the dojo, Rachel, have you ever seen letters like this in a workshop or in a classroom environment?
Sometimes, yes.
So I see stuff like this frequently because I teach a lot of lettering workshops, and I just real quickly want to go over some of what I call the no-no letters. So first of all, an S that gets skinny in the middle. We see a lot of what I call baby serifs happening a lot of times. An N that's thin in the middle, which is kind of incorrect. For some reason, people want to pick up that middle leg of the M a lot of times. People want to add a little additional serif. And sometimes people want to treat the top of the T like it's an ascender, like on L or H or K or something like that. But I've gone through and fixed these letters so we can see properly that an S is thick in the middle. Serifs can be much, much bigger than people tend to think. N is thick in the middle. M has all three legs sitting nicely at the baseline. N has no serif on that top right. And the T ascender is not really an ascender. It's just like a little nub that shoots above the X height a little bit. So I just wanted to go over that stuff while I had a captive audience, because that's a big transition, letters like that to letters that are more following the rules. There's a lot that happens there in terms of readability and just generally looking like you care about what you're doing and you want to do a good job. Okay. Moving on, in college, I did a little project called The Woods of Wisdom, which was like a 50-part poster series, and I focused on just bad advice. So each poster kind of had this little weird wood alphabet. I cut the letters out of balsa wood, and I just did differences of what I thought was terrible advice. This last one, happiness is rare, learn to settle. I've now come full circle, and I think it's actually pretty good advice. But at any rate, near the end of the project, I turned this into an actual working digital typeface, just like in a few days, kind of for fun. I was starting to learn the type software at the time was FontLab. And it was a little challenge to myself to go quickly and do as good a job as I could. That typeface ended up going out on Lost Type. Lost Type was just getting started at that time, and I emailed Riley Cran, the guy who runs it, and he graciously accepted the typeface to host there, and it was amazing. I really have to thank Riley. He opened my world up in terms of what was possible professionally. So that was a very, very big deal. And I immediately started working on new display typefaces for Lost Type and had a great time working on those and trying to get better and learn new things and growing. And eventually people started using it in different places. So John Sueda with Edmondson, this aesthetic apparatus poster, Ross Dress for Less in Las Vegas had some wisdom script going on, some dildo stuff from Trojan, some booze stuff, Urban Outfitters, Durex. Like these things were just popping up all over the place, and it was very, very exciting for me to see. What was not exciting for me to see was when people would use it for tattoos and stuff like that, and it was really, really heartbreaking. To see kind of a bad, you know, not the best typeface, but definitely something that should not be used in a tattoo sort of context. Anyways, this is the part of my job that makes me most sad. But moving on. After college, after I got my undergrad, I went to the Type Media program in The Hague in the Netherlands. And that was the thing that like really, really propelled me forward, and I learned a ton. I met amazing people that were just incredibly inspiring and way smarter than I was. That's always a good thing if you can surround yourself with people that know a whole lot more than you do and are a lot better than you at things. So yeah, that was my time at KBK. There's us all. In the middle, Frank Griesheimer, who was there to teach a workshop at the time. But the crew here is dope. We got Nina Stossinger. She's now at Tobias, working for Tobias. Alexandre Sommier-Demare, who is working at Type Network these days. Mark, Hugo, and David, Slavi Slaverson, who's done a lot of type work since then. Mark Fromberg and Mark DeWin. Mark Fromberg from Germany, who's now done some. He did a typeface recently called Gintronic. This is the amazing monospace thing, and Mark DeWin puts on a lot of type events in Singapore. So a very passionate, very talented group of people. And Frank, of course, is a type designer at Adobe here in San Francisco, one of my great friends. So now I'm teaching in the master department at California College of the Arts. I'm leading the critiques at Type Thursday, which is a monthly meetup group in San Francisco, and I teach at Type at Cooper West in the extended program, and I'm also teaching a 10-week lettering course at the moment. So I could show a little bit of work and process. I have 2 typefaces in here, but I think we'll probably only have time to get through one of these. Does that sound okay to you, Rachel?
That sounds fine.
Okay, let's get going. So I run OHNO. And of course, the best thing about running your own company is getting to draw as many logos for it as you want. I have a great time with all the branding stuff and doing the graphic design. I don't want to do any graphic design ever unless it's for myself, because that's basically all I can do. I'm not a good graphic designer when it comes to having clients. So we have Hobo out right now. That was kind of the first release, along with Victor Script, which was a collaboration with the amazing lettering artist Eric Marinovich, who's another great buddy of mine here in San Francisco. I do a lot of lettering work in addition to typeface design. Recently, I had to do something like 25, 26 hand-lettered script logo types that were all part of this family, this like network of websites. And it was so fun to push and try and come up with new ideas. And even when I felt like I might be stuck a little bit, I would get a ton of new ideas. So this area of just sticking within connected scripts, even that is infinite. Like, you can do such an amazing variety of things, even working within one genre. That's something that's always inspiring and so fun to me about the type world, is that it just keeps going. You can always learn more. You can always experiment with new styles. And as soon as you feel like you're done, you know, there's a whole other script to learn, or a whole other language. So it's an infinite area of knowledge to be acquired. I'm interested in typefaces that typeface families that work in different ways. So this was an experimental thing where we imagined what would happen if type got put into a microwave. So it starts frozen, gets warmer and warmer, so things start getting, letters start touching each other. And then as things get more burned in the microwave and like inedible, then they get kind of illegible, is the metaphor I was going for. So that's like the most extreme style, which is kind of approaching like a graffiti thing, when these negative spaces are just kind of hairlines. And then it explodes, of course. But I think it's interesting that even though these individual styles are totally different, that they can kind of work together just by sharing general proportions. And that's kind of creating an overall image that you don't see a lot of, because people are mostly just working with weight and width a lot of times. And I think that's great, and those are very useful tools for designers. but it's also interesting to think about building families in weird and unusual ways. So yeah, I like the weight and width thing too. This is a sans project that I could talk a little bit more about later if you guys are interested.
Oh, I'm interested now.
You're interested now?
Bit, yeah. What are we looking at?
Okay. Well, I was just going to show this with regards to the interpolation thing. So let me jump into Superpolator so I can show people how just by drawing a few different masters that you can get all these different weights out of it. So I've only drawn 4 different things here: the extra bold extended, the extra bold condensed, the kind of regular or just slightly bold condensed, and then the extended. And then just by drawing them properly, you can basically, all it's doing is an Illustrator blend in between all these different styles. So the idea with type design is that there's almost always some way to automate the work that is truly repetitive and not creative. And it's just all about working smarter and not harder. As time goes on, the tools are continuing to get better all the time. And it's a really interesting thing to keep tabs on and to kind of see where that goes. But anyways, that's kind of a basic sans thing that I was doing, sort of based on or inspired by the heavier weights of like Gil Ko and Antique Olive Nord and some of these interesting kind of one-off weights, you know, like Gil was this very normal family that had this one kind of weird member. So I thought it would be interesting to see what would happen if those weird members were sort of the driving force in the family. Anyway,
James, Yves has a question.
Oh, okay. What is it?
He's saying you can also go outside the interpolation square to test extreme weights, right?
Yeah, you can extrapolate, but things get pretty hairy pretty quickly. So depending on how you've drawn things, so here I am going to go outside the square, and like that's working kind of barely. It's looking like the T is kind of getting totally filled in. And as we push it, things start to break fairly quickly. On the light end, things won't break so early, but they'll start looking really jacked up pretty soon. So yeah, you can see like that might be a fun thing to play with, but it's not going to be ready for retail. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. So it's easy to jack it up with very little effort. Anyways,
right. He's saying just for testing.
Well, just for testing. Yeah. I mean, I will always try that stuff to really figure out how far is too far. That's kind of the point of it, is to answer the question of, you know, how wide is wide, how bold is a bold, all these terms that are totally subjective. Figuring out the extreme point where it's not really working anymore is tremendously important. So I get inspired by all sorts of things, as everyone does. There's it could be absolutely anything, but in particular, I'm a music guy. I like to play music, and I like to go to shows and stuff like that. And I'm obsessed with one band in particular, Wolfpack. Even my shirt today, I'm wearing my Game Winner shirt, which is the sort of like 5th member of Wolfpack. This guy Joey Dosick, this amazing soul singer. Anyways, I love this band. I got really crazy into this band, and I was a very vocal fan of theirs. And I did like fan art. You know, I love fan art. I love the idea that you'll get so excited about anything, a TV show, a band, or whatever, and you'll be compelled to make something because of it. So I did some fan art. I used some of their music in a couple of videos and stuff like that. And one day I got an email from the guy in the band leader, and he was interested in doing a sort of collaboration with me and doing a custom font for his band. So this was like the best day of my life. Like I was jumping off the walls in my apartment. I was totally thrilled. I was going to get to work with, you know, one of my musical heroes on a creative project. And that was very, very exciting to me. In the email, he talked about what he was using, and it seemed like he was a very savvy guy. So that's always cool to work with someone who's really in the know and is into it. You know, it's not like they'll just settle for whatever. And yeah, he seemed very authentic about his interest in type. He wanted to use the IBM Selectric typewriter. It came with this one weird font called light italic. It just kind of had this generic name. Most of the fonts were normal, like letter Gothic, just kind of these typical monospace designs. But light italic was this really weird kind of one-off thing. There was no matching Roman there at all. And he wanted to use that as inspiration. So I immediately started sketching different logos and stuff like that based on the light italic, but kind of dialing up the funky element a little bit, trying to get things looking a bit more handmade while still referencing the typewriter stuff and still keeping it in monospace. But whenever you're sketching, I think it's important to try and push the extremes there as well, because it's such a fast way of testing ideas. Just with pencil on paper, I'm amazed at how quickly you can just say, you know, what do these parameters want to be? And you'll land somewhere without too much messing around. And then you know that you've made a very smart decision, a very informed decision about whatever particular design direction you're considering. So just by, it's just like thinking through sketching. This is something that was hammered into our brains in grad school all the time. And Eric Van Blockland, one of the lead teachers at the Type Media program, was just always pushing like we don't know anything. Like there's always the question, I see this in workshops all the time. People say, oh, what do you think it would look like if I did this? Or do you think this would be really cool if it was bold or something like that? And I don't know. You know, no one knows. You just got to give it a shot and see what happens. And it takes no time at all. These are loose sketches. I think there's so much to be gained by keeping sketches loose, not getting married to it, not treating it like it's this holy thing, and not making it perfect, you know, not spending a ton of time dialing it in, just kind of moving quick and doing thumbnails. There's so much there. So anyways, I did all this stuff, but Jack didn't really care. He just said he liked the original drawing. But anyways, I had explored the stuff, so it was useful. And it became more useful later on. So he said, ooh, that initial logo is it. Go with that. Like all his emails were basically one sentence long or sometimes one word long. In the vectorization process, you can get really stale looking vectors if you're not careful. This is always something I think about, because computers want to draw rectangles and circles, and that's, oh, really, they only want to draw rectangles pretty much. But I'm not a big fan of rectangles, and I think they look cold and just not human enough. They don't evoke enough personality for the most part, depending on the situation, of course. But I think there's a difference between a perfect line, a perfectly straight line, and something just with a little bit of give in it. So I've switched, perhaps unnoticeably. Let's zoom in on the top of that square. And so the difference between that and that. So we see the corners get a little bit more defined, and I've added just a little bit of give in each straight line. I think that's a small thing. Obviously, it's a tiny decision, but there are thousands and thousands of curves or straight lines in a typeface. And when you echo that design decision through all of those segments, it kind of builds up to evoke a bit more warmth. With regards to the spacing of the typeface, normally the idea is you fit space in and around the letter. So you start with a very normal letter, a lowercase n, and you put a couple of those next to each other, and you can start measuring the interior space versus the letter space. So the counter space and the letter space, and kind of taking the measurement there and getting it hopefully close to about of a one-to-one relationship as a good place to start. And you can chop off the top and the bottom of the letter and see that we kind of have like a picket fence thing happening. That's often a starting point. It's not necessarily where you will arrive, but it can get you going. And with the N done, you've spaced all these normal-ish letters. So I, M, H, R, L, U, all very normal letters. And chopping off the tops and the bottoms reveals that nice little picket fence thing happening. With the weirdo letters, which comprise, definitely more than half the alphabet, you just put them in between a couple of N's and say, oh, does that feel more or less like it's where it's supposed to be? All of these weirdos get spaced that way. In monospace land, so remember this is a monospace typeface, this full thing, it's kind of the opposite thing. So you turn it upside down and say, instead of fitting the space around the letter, you're fitting the letter around the available space. So all of these are occupying the same horizontal distance. The narrowest letters, like the I and the L, have to fit in the same little area as the M and the W. And things get weird, basically. With this particular design, it was kind of the slab serif italic. So you had these entry and exit strokes to play with in terms of elongating them, getting them to occupy as much or as little horizontal space as possible. Without too much effort, you can get a lowercase going. And I think it's important to sort of quantify how much time these things take. So you can sketch out a lowercase, or at least I can, in maybe a day if I'm like really, really moving, or probably more realistically a couple of days. But of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the work that needs to be done. So after the italic, I just want to play around and make a matching Roman. That wasn't really part of the original prompt, but I thought it might be interesting to take a look at. And then you have the uppercase and lowercase of each of those. So immediately the project was starting to snowball. And I was only supposed to do one style, but I kind of couldn't help myself here. So after a little while, you can have a sort of fake paragraph. So the reason it's fake is because there's no punctuation here. There's no figures or anything. It's just kind of a prototype that's approximating the idea of a finished typeface. But I remembered my previous sketches, and I thought it might be interesting to pursue other weights as well. So now we're like really starting to snowball, and things are getting completely out of control. And I was doing this project full time, and it was just, I had a blast working on these different styles in the Roman and in the italic. The light seemed to be working pretty well. I was stoked on that. And once you've drawn the light and the bold, like I was talking about in Interpolator, you can just blend between the two, and the computer does most of the annoying stuff for you. So after some more time, you get some punctuation going, you get numbers going, then you have sort of a real idea of how this thing is going to truly work. The symbols and kind of more obscure punctuation come later. It's very possible that people don't ever even dip into this part of the character set, but it is there when they need it. I mean, of course, people are going to use currency and maybe like, you know, a copyright symbol sometimes, but for the most part, I don't see this stuff used too much with my fonts. Because it was a band, and it was a very musically literate band, I thought I would just do a couple of graphics or kind of clip art thing for notation. And this font is not supposed to be used for true notation. I was just imagining these more working like kind of emoji, that sort of thing. And I mean, if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it in all weights, of course. So there's the black treble clef, which was an especially fun one to draw.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rachel. And yeah, and at the end, you kind of get to play around with it and make all this fake graphic design. And that's the sort of story of Wolf Mono. Now people are starting to use it. I see it in use occasionally here and there. It's a very reasonably priced thing. That was part of the idea with the band, is that this was something for fans of the band. So many of those people have never bought a typeface before in their lives and probably can't wrap their head around a price tag or that would be typical. So it's priced quite low for what it is, I think, basically. That's the story of Wolf Mono. Rachel, how are we doing on time?
We're okay. We've got about 20 minutes left.
Okay, maybe I'll just do the Hobo Rococo thing as well. All right, since it's all queued up and stuff. So anyways, by this point in the presentation, if you've been following along, you know that I'm a real nut for display stuff, and the cornier the better a lot of times. When I said to like my friends and family when I first started getting into type design, they were kind of like, oh, so do you do like blood drip fonts and like snow covered fonts and stuff like that? Because that was kind of the stuff that they had been exposed to on like Da Font or whatever. And at that time I was like, no, I do like really cool, like highbrow stuff. And like, I'm a real designer. But now I'm super into the novelty stuff, and I don't think there's any shame in it, especially when you consider the novelty fonts that have been produced in the past, and the level of quality with which they were drawn is amazing. Incredibly ornate designs that you don't really see get produced too often anymore. People are still doing super display stuff that's highly ornate, but not in the same way that they were. Anyways, so I sketch all the different weird hobos, log hobo, blood drip hobo. I always had a blast doing that. Cat hobo. And it was basically to honor the original hobo. Here it is shown in the 1923 American Type Founders specimen book. Hobo has a very rich history. The poster designer Wes Wilson, you could tell, was a fan earlier in his career. So the poster on the left here is something like 1960, and then as his career goes on and he continues to take more and more acid, the forms get super abstracted and become less legible and kind of more decorative. But really, it's all totally rooted in Hobo. The problem was the digitizations of Hobo that were available were terrible because it seemed like no one loved it was the problem. If you look at that ampersand there, it looks like just a scan of a photocopy of a fax or something. It's not very lovingly drawn, and that was sad to me as a guy that was obsessed with Hobo, and I was learning more about it, and I was continually more and more impressed with it, because even though no one seemed to like it, it successfully made each jump in technology, even into like one of the first fonts to be digitized. So everyone had one, some version of Hobo. I think it was popular just because it was the most readily available exotic thing. So when type was physical, when you had an entire cabinet and you had to house an entire cabinet in your print shop or whatever, you didn't want to have a million weird display typefaces. That was not a practical thing at all because there just wasn't the space for it. Now, of course, fonts are digital and they're tiny, tiny files even, so there's no reason not to have plenty of options. But anyways, all these different foundries had them, and they were all total garbage. Particularly the uppercase letters that had straight parts in them. I was like, why does Hobo have any straight? Like, that doesn't seem like it makes any sense to me. There should be no straight lines in this typeface. It's an Art Nouveau thing originally, so straight line was not jiving with me. It was designed originally around 1905 and released after that, but of course there was no euro back in those days. And when some intern or whatever was forced to put one into Hobo, they kind of half-assed it, more or less. And with the @ symbol as well. I mean, Bitstream didn't even try. They just put in the default one. It's like, come on, guys. Have a little bit of pride in what you do. I love the tilde just kind of made a weird circle off a scaled down version of the lowercase a. At least Elster and Flocke went with the italic A, which is kind of fun to see. I probably like that one the best. Anyways, in the phototype setting era, people were doing pretty cool things with Hobo. So they had a couple of tricks in here. And because it was easier to work with like alternates, you had a descending G and things like that. So Hobo was, of course, a novelty typeface for having no descenders, so nothing that went below the baseline. And sometimes people like that, and sometimes people find it easier to read the more traditional form. So this is from a photo lettering manual, and you could have either thing. So you could have descenders if you wanted them. Yeah, they were flipping the O upside down when it was next to the L. They were doing tricky little kerning things with the R and the A. All these subtle little moves that were very respectful of the typeface. I thought it was good to see that. So I wanted to put that into a digital form, basically. And that kind of became my job, was just to make the best quality Hobo that has ever existed. I really like that as a job because it's so easy to succeed in that job. When you make a real niche career for yourself, you know you're doing the best work out there because no one else is doing it. So now Hobo supports all these languages, and it has a lot of weights. It has the descending alternates that we were talking about. It has weird numbers, that old style figures that don't descend and are old style. And this was an idea from the type designer Jackson Kavanaugh from OK Type, a great foundry. He's also a big fan of Hobo, and he said I have to do this, and I agreed, and I've never seen them in use once, so that's good. I wanted to bring it back to the Art Nouveau sort of roots, so I included various accoutrements that reflected that, and of course drew all the things that weren't there in the first place. So in the end, I wound up with a working version of Hobo, but I was still really interested in the super display stuff. On the left, Obsidian from Heffler & Co., a recent release from them based on their Surveyor typeface, where Andy Clymer has expertly employed some incredible programming to apply these lighting effects. And on the right, Ben Keel's work on Dalla Flutta to produce Dalla Prisma, which is this amazing stripe thing. So by applying the decoration or the sort of special treatment to the strokes themselves, they're getting a really unique result. Imagine how lame it looks when you're not thinking about the stroke of the letters themselves, and you're just kind of putting something on top of something else, or you're filling something with pattern. Like, that is so lazy and such a bummer to me. This is so much worse than this. Is just like sublime. So nice. So anyways, I was very interested in the difference between filling things with pattern and applying a distilled idea to the strokes themselves. And I thought of this typeface, Carlisle Rococo, and I was inspired by that, and I used it in the sort of bottom line of this Beatrice Ward poster. So this was a total weird thing that I didn't think would really go anywhere, but I kind of fell in love with it as I was drawing it, and I wondered what the rest of the alphabet would look like. So without too much effort, you know, sketching quickly, not getting too attached to things, I quickly imagined the rest of the letters, kind of based on this Hobo skeleton. but very, very decorative and ornate. And I just had so much fun doing it. I just kind of kept doing it. I don't know. It was something that was very easy for me to work on, and the letters themselves were challenging and required some patience, but at the end of the day, I was having fun. It takes a little while to go from the sketch to a really good drawing of it. That's probably a few hours of work, maybe, with this kind of difficult glyph. But it was a meditative thing for me, and I would just turn on some Howard Stern or something and let it go. So yeah, it takes forever, and I made it take longer by doing some additional style. So of course you have to have the background style so you can separate the color. And of course you got to have borders because it's just not fancy enough without the borders. And then I also felt like I needed something that could work at a very small size in addition to Hobo, Rococo, the normal style. So I came up with a sort of customized version of Hobo that's wider, kind of built for smaller sizes, has these sharper terminals, kind of more fancy and a little less psychedelic than Hobo. I also created a little DrawBot script to set the borders automatically, and all of these different border styles. I made myself do 25 of them. This is one of those things where it's like you lock yourself in your room and you say you're not going to eat dinner until you've drawn 25 or something like that. Not that I did this all in one day, but you know what I mean? It's like you don't feel like it's possible to do that many of something until you do it. And yeah, I don't know. It was fun to play with the borders as well, kind of removing it from the type world and just sort of creating these graphics. Kind of looked like pressed metal ceilings. So anyways, that is Hobo Rococo. It was basically all built so I could have a really fancy end user license agreement for my fonts, which I always wanted to print this like an 18 by 24 poster or something like that. But I haven't done that yet. I still want to. I need to find a letterpress printer that can print really, really big. But yeah, it's an insane typeface, and it's probably a huge waste of time. The reality is this stuff won't get used by that many people. But I try and not get too bummed out about that, because I think we're put on this earth to do the work that we want to do. So even if it's something that will not be the next Helvetica or Gotham or whatever, if you want to work on it and you're stoked on it, then you're going to do the best job anyone's going to do. So I always encourage people to explore and find the things that appeal to them, even if they don't appeal to anyone else. And go deep on whatever it is that you're interested in. I'm really into type and lettering, and I'm trying to get some other interests as well. We mentioned music a lot, and I think it's important just to go as deep into your hobbies as you possibly can. And DrawBot is a really cool resource, and Font Stand. Anytime I present anywhere, I feel like I should mention Font Stand as a great place to try out typefaces. It's very, very reasonably priced. You can demo for free. To all the students out there watching now or later, please try out Font Stand. It's such a valuable resource. And that's it. I said, thank you, AIGA Wisconsin, because this is from an old presentation. But we will instead say thank you to the Dojo for hosting me. And that's it for the presentation.
Okay, great. Guys, if you have any questions, please put them underneath the questions and answers tab, or questions and topics tab, and we will go through them one by one. I do have a question for you. What is DrawBot? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And I have it open here. Okay. So if I'm still sharing my screen, DrawBot is basically a Python editor that just shows a graphic output for Python code. So really simple Python code is something like x equals 5 plus 1, and then you can say print X, and it'll output there 6. The same way you can get text output, you can get graphic output. So behind here, I have a much more complex script, but basically it's saying, for all the fonts that I want to look at, let me see this one character in particular. So I can change that to say, let's see what the number 57 looks like in all these different fonts. So I can run that, and very quickly it just shows me 57 in all of these different typefaces, which is really useful if you're curious about what a particular letter or glyph looks like, and you kind of just want to see how all the traditional things approach that. Or if you're working on like a logo or something, and you want to kind of run through all your typefaces, but instead of just hitting the down arrow on Illustrator a million times, you can get computers to kind of automate that work for you. It's such a valuable idea that even in this day and age, it's 2017, and we're just kind of scratching the surface on what computers can do for us to free us up for the creative stuff. So that's the point, is that we should be as free for the creative work as we possibly can, and everything that can be automated will eventually be automated.
I see. Well, Ryan is asking, how is that different than what a type manager does?
It's very similar in this particular script. I don't have any type managers, but this script can do, or this program, DrawBot, can do anything that you tell it to. So it's all according to what code you put into here. You can make a little tiny thing that acts like a type manager, or you can make something that prints out, like DJR used DrawBot to print out all the name badges for a conference. So this is software that is free, that anyone can use, and you can use it for whatever you dream up. Just with, it's amazing how much you can do even with a small amount of coding knowledge. Like, I'm not a real software engineer. Like, I'm pretty slow when it comes to this stuff in general, but I still find it incredibly useful.
Very cool. Awesome. Shall we close your screen up so you can see us?
Sure. I can jump back to not talking. Oh, hey, there you are.
Great. So if you take a look through the chats, people are asking, what we'll do is go through the questions, or do you want to address the OHNO Dojo? So which one do you want to do first?
Oh, let's do the Dojo first of all.
Okay.
Because I had a clear favorite in that. It was from Joe Burke, who posted the 3000 specimen by Mark Renault. That was like such a sick typeface. Yeah, Joe Burke, amazing choice there. I love that typeface. Mark's work is phenomenal. Everyone at Type Media this year did some amazing stuff, but that one in particular, I was like, this typeface needs to exist in the real world for sure. So I hope he's working on the legit version of that, because I know graduation projects are often not quite finished typefaces, basically.
Right. Well, nice work, Joe. We'll definitely contact you to get you your
whatever you
want.
So we're gonna give him a free typeface, right? That's what we said, Rachel.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, whatever Joe wants from the OHNO catalog.
Yeah.
Yeah, sick, dude. Whatever you want, but don't come out and say like, oh, I want it licensed for like 1,000 users or something like that.
Or you can. Let's see what happens, right? Always pushing the boundaries.
No, Rachel, no. 1 to 3 users.
Oh,
that's it.
Users. Okay. Yeah, Joe. I don't know if you can see it, but Joe's saying, yeah, his company is asking.
No, not your company, Joe.
All right, let's
try that shit with me.
Let's go to the questions. All right, I'm gonna start. All right, here you go. So Joe is first. He's asking, where's the best place to start learning Python with type design in mind?
I don't know, Joe, your proximity to either coast, but every year in New York and in San Francisco, Andy Clymer, sometimes Ben Keeler, these guys that are the foremost experts in that field, along with Yus Van Rossum, sometimes teach these workshops through Type at Cooper. So I would say that would be the best possible option. I know it's not really reasonable to expect that everyone can go to San Francisco or New York, but I think a great place to go is just learning the DrawBot basics and kind of getting some understanding of what happens in the code editor and how Python works. But as far as with regards to type design and other things in scripting, like in RoboFont and stuff like that, just start digging around in your extensions and seeing how the code in the extensions that you use is working. That might be pretty out there as like a crowd pleaser question. That's getting very specific. But I'll also say to anyone that's curious about that stuff, it's so hard because it's such a small niche. Like the type world is tiny. And then when you get like just into the programming in the type world, that's extremely tiny. So I'm always happy to answer emails from people that just get in touch and say like, hey, this is something that you might be able to shed some light on, and hopefully I can point people to either a book or a website or some online resource where they can figure some stuff out. And I'm always happy to do that because so many people were doing that for me when I first got started. Wrong side of the planet for Type at Cooper events. Yeah, reverse engineering, basically, I think it is the best way to go and get familiar with the documentation. It's not the most glamorous or the most fun, but yeah, check out how the extensions are functioning.
Are there any online classes or online resources for that?
Particularly for like type technology? No, not that I know of. And the reason is just there's not enough people like to do a Skillshare class on it or something like that. But what, Joe, out of curiosity, what is the wrong side of the planet? Because there's plenty of stuff in Europe. Yeah, Eves is chiming in and saying, well, there's Reading, UK, and The Hague, and I bet in your country there is someone that is knowledgeable about this sort of thing. Yeah, Germany. I mean, if you're in Germany, dude, like you can't swing a dead cat with hitting a type designer in Germany.
Please don't do that, but okay. Hey, Joe, so let us know where you're from so we can, let's see.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. Anyways, we can keep going with questions.
All right. Okay, here we go.
check out my cat or my owl mug.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, we got the good one. The good mug today.
Eric is asking, balsa wood is really brittle and unforgiving. Why did you choose that to cut type out of?
I liked balsa wood because I could carve it with an X-Acto knife, and it is brittle, but I found it kind of okay to work with, actually. It was very thin, so it was basically like trimming paper. And the reason Wisdom Script has those very straight vertical lines is because that was where the grain of the wood was going. So it's definitely easier to cut the straight lines than it was to cut the curves and stuff like that. But it was thin enough balsa wood that it was more or less like cutting cardboard or paper.
Okay. Great, thank you. And Dave is asking, do you have a super clear idea of where you want to take your career and your work? Or are you sort of just doing what you love, taking opportunities when they come and seeing what happens?
Yeah, definitely the latter, I think. Growing up, I was very interested in like goal setting and like doing like super self-helpy kind of affirmations and stuff like that, and saying like, oh, I want to make like this much money by like I'm at this age, or I want this sort of job, or And eventually I just found I was much happier to not be so attached to those sorts of goals, and yeah, just taking opportunities. I very much enjoy thinking of myself as a passenger in my own life and not like the guy who's like steering the ship. You know what I mean? I think just things kind of happen, and I'll just work hard in whatever way people want me to work. Like now I'm very fortunate that people come to me and ask me to help out with different things. So now I'm just like, yeah, if you want my help, great. I'll try my best to help you out. And if no one's talking to me, then I'll be off in the corner doing my own thing too, you know.
Okay, cool. Hopefully that helps, Dave. Yves has a question. How was starting up your own foundry? What do you feel are the advantages of doing everything yourself, and what are the less fun aspects?
I think setting up a foundry is the most fun thing ever. And I love having that control, especially in the type world. And marketing Typefaces it's a bummer sometimes because it's like so vanilla. Everyone's very afraid to do something kind of weird. There's a couple of standouts that I think are doing amazing work, like Underwear is doing awesome stuff, like really great type and very interesting, fun marketing ideas, like printing books with blood and like all this crazy stuff. I love it. House Industries, amazing, amazing stuff, has such a personality and so much life in it, and absolutely top-notch quality work. There's a few more foundries in addition to that, but in general, it seemed like there was a good opportunity for me to kind of do things my way and see if people responded to that, and do silly things and do jokes and not take it very seriously. Basically not do it like Monotype was doing it, you know what I mean? So not super corporate, and if people don't like it or they get offended or whatever, then like, okay, whatever, we can just market to a smaller group of people. Kind of, I'm more interested in how like skateboard companies and skateboard brands build themselves rather than just kind of regurgitating what the type industry sees over and over all the time. So when you have your own foundry, you have the control to do that, and it's great. I love that freedom, and I love that I don't have to go to fucking meetings and like waste time, and everything that I do is really useful for the business. I definitely don't feel like I'm spinning my wheels at all. So for that, it's worth it 1,000 times over. Of course, like there's some annoying stuff to deal with. There's taxes and I mean, that's basically it. It's like some bookkeeping stuff, but I kind of enjoy that too. I kind of like being able to run the business myself and not rely on anyone else. It does get lonely is the sad part. Like I'm very jealous of my friends that are working at larger companies where they get to go into a work environment and there's all these cool people around them every day and they're all working together and they have people to go out to lunch with every day. You know, like there's just always something going on. Here I'm in my apartment and I have a nice studio space. I'm not in my studio space right now because I wanted to be close to the router. But I have a nice studio space and I like being there. But at the same time, like this is a solitary pursuit. Like I'm hanging out solo a huge amount of the time. That's why I've gotten into teaching, and I like things like this and speaking different places because it kind of gets me out of the house in some way.
And so, Thursday,
I mean,
sure.
Yeah, Type Thursday, totally same sort of thing. Okay. And in general, yeah, running my own foundry for me has been great, and it's just been such a joy in general.
Great. Thank you everyone for the questions. Yves has another.
Yeah.
Do you have to deal with customer support and related problems often? Do you mind having to do things?
Yeah, I do it often, and I don't mind at all. All the emails are written now, so I just kind of spit out whatever thing that they need help with. And if they really need like new fonts to be built or whatever, like I can work with them on that. And I don't get bummed out by that at all. It's usually a good way to surprise people with how like good my customer service is. Like I do take pride in having like really exceptional customer service. And I want, you know, when people to buy a font from me, that it will be a good investment for them. So I don't want to just like sell them this thing and forget about them. You know, if they ever need anything, they come to me. And yeah, I think you have to kind of be able to do it, but it's fun. You know, people are chill. In general, graphic designers, people buying typefaces, they're a good crowd, basically, especially like teaching things in the lettering workshops. Like it's so rare that we get an asshole in there or get someone who's like just a pain to be around. It's much more common that the people are enthusiastic and passionate and want to learn. And I find the same thing with my customers, basically.
And you're working on your own work. I mean, it's not like you're doing client work and you have to fix someone else's work, right? You're working on your projects. So
totally. I think
it's your own stuff.
Right. I think about that all the time. I, of course, worked for other people for a large part of my career. And I remember having an attitude towards things like when we had to like order swag or something, I would think, oh, this is such a drag. I have to put this logo on like some postcard or something I don't care about at all. And I have to go on this shitty printer's website and like navigate through this cluttered UI. And this is such a drag. And there's just a perception difference. Like the work is the same. Like I still have to do that stuff that's not super glamorous all the time. But for some reason, doing it for myself is a lot easier, and I can do it. I don't find it to be a pain, really.
Good. Thank you. So we have one more question from Joe, and then we'll end it here. I know you guys want to go 3 hours, but it's past the time, so we don't want to keep them up too long. So
I love how this is just all basically about you.
We're not meaning to, but you know. So Joe is asking, I know, I'm glad he's here. So Joe is asking, how do collaborations on typefaces work in your experience? Is that one person does the initial drawings and the other perfects it? I struggle to imagine the process.
I mean, it can be anything. I mentioned underwear before, and they have 3 designers, I think, working on Dropbox. I think it's just a bunch of font files on Dropbox that they're all kind of collaborating on through really excellent communication. So those guys would know a lot more about it than I would. But when I collaborated with Eric Marinovich on Victor's script, it was more of a thing where he was providing the initial drawings, sketches, kind of just loose brush pen stuff, and it was up to me to kind of take it and bend things into shape. And there was a tremendous change that happened, because just putting sketches and just laying vectors over the sketches was not going to really give a good product. So we worked a lot, but I think it just takes a good attitude of someone saying like, okay, this was my thing and now it's our thing, or it's your thing. Like to have one person in the end who's really making the final call is important. In my experience, collaborations where there's a clear leader and there's other people helping out, those kind of tend to work the best, because it's just an efficient way of making decisions. You know, if you can kind of work with people you trust and that trust you, that's half the work, basically. Yeah, it is a total personal thing, and there are a lot of personal preferences that go into it at the end of the day. But it's also like, I don't know, it's not an artistic statement, it's a piece of design. So it's okay that you kind of you make these compromises, basically.
Okay. Joe, I hope that helps. we got 2 more slipped in. Do you have time to do 2 more questions, or all right?
Oh, Rachel, I got all the time in the world. I don't know if I've told you this, but pretty slow day around the office today.
Okay. So we have 1 more question, but I can't read the name really. Monitors, maybe. Did you face any copyright issues with Hobo? Oh, it's from
I actually get this question a lot. No, the answer is no. I changed the spelling on it. It's Hobeaux instead of Hobo. But it's, yeah, I mean, that was kind of like my just in case thing. But the real thing that's happening there, I think, is no one cares because no one likes that typeface. Like no one really is keeping tabs on it. Adobe has one. Monotype probably has a dozen. Yeah, it's 100 years old over that, right. So it's in the public domain. Yeah, I never even got a hint of a legal issue with Hobo.
Or maybe even the Rococo. Yeah. Maybe they'll come after you for Rococo.
I doubt it. I don't think so. But who knows?
You never know. Okay, so Eric is asking the last question, guys. This is the last one. So Eric says, what is the last font you bought and what is the last font you stole?
Oh, my own question. The last font I stole, I remember in college, I've probably stolen fonts since then too. But in college, I like actively stole, like I did like a torrent search for like Heffler and Frere Jones and like Emigre and House Industries, and I, with zero effort, like amassed this font library of thousands and thousands of dollars. And I was like panting. I was like sweating in my computer seat. Like I didn't even know you could do that. And now I just did it in 2 seconds, and I have all these fonts. And I remember just like sweating. My like heart was beating, and I felt really terrible about it. And I think I've deleted those fonts.
Oh, I hope so. That's
I don't know. They're probably somewhere on my hard drive, but I don't like have them and I don't use them because that was around the time that I first started designing type, basically. And all it takes is like 30 minutes of designing type for you to figure out like why these things cost money, you know? So after that, I kind of got right with God and realized I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the world if I was asking people to buy this stuff and then stealing it myself. I think on my hard drive, there's still things that I haven't appropriately licensed that I either just try and look at for research purposes, or I'm the company you got surveyed for licenses. Huh.
Whoa.
I've never heard of that happening. But if I see people using my type and I know that they haven't paid for it, I just have an email that I send saying, hey, like, come on, guys. It's basically an email that just says, come on, guys, and then a link to where they can buy it. Oh, Eve's happened to them at their former company. That is really, really good to hear. Yeah, and totally just, if you're a corporation of any decent size, like you can't screw that stuff up. Like it's such an easy thing to protect yourself on, you know? Just make sure your font libraries are up to date and that there's no shady behavior going on, and educate your designers on that stuff, because it is no joke. And you're supporting an industry that's a beautiful thing. The type industry is the coolest thing in the world because it's full of all these people that are truly passionate about this stuff, and they're not in it for the money, but they gotta, you know, live just like everybody else. So the last font that I've purchased, maybe I don't buy too many fonts, but maybe Noe Display from Chic Toika. This awesome typeface. NOE. Noe Display. Really, really nice stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, anyways, that's it.
That's it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us. I loved it. It was very funny, actually. And you've got some great comments that I haven't read everything because there's been so much. But when you get a chance to go through them, James, feel free to read through them. But love it. Oh, thank you, Yves, for giving us that link. So everyone have a good evening and have a good day, or if you're Yves, have a good night's sleep. And thank you again, James. We'll talk to you guys later. Oh, just before you guys finish off though, in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking to Bethany Heck. She's a typographer who works for Vox Media, and we'll talk about combining typefaces. Talk to you later.
I have one more.
Okay.
I'm speaking March 7th at the Public Library in San Francisco. If you're in San Francisco, please come to the Public Library at 6 p.m. Yeah, March 7th. Cool. That's it.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. So what we'll do is invite everybody to a Facebook group, and then we can exchange those links there. Is that good? Exactly. It's a little far for you, yes.
Sorry, Yves. I'll Periscope you in, man.
So Jason Pagura is in San Francisco area. I think he's in Cupertino. He's asking us at the main branch?
Yeah, main branch, the Civic Center branch of the Public Library.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, well, follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, that's why I know I'm such good work. Bye, James, and bye,
Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, bye-bye.